The perfect tool. That's what the man sleeping on my bed called the wife who betrayed me. From an anonymous motel room miles away, I sat in front of my laptop screen, listening to his every word through the security camera system he didn't even know existed. My wife, Leah, thought she was executing a perfect plan, conning me out of our house and $112,000 in savings. Her lover, Trevor, knew the real prize was the land beneath that house, a gold mine worth $2.5 million. What neither of them knew was that either husband they thought was stuck in Mosul was hearing everything. The divorce email Leah sent me wasn't an ending. It was a signal to begin a campaign. They thought they were up against a broken soldier. They didn't know they were providing me with all the intelligence I needed to formulate a perfect counterplan. They made a fatal mistake. They turned my house into their headquarters and me into their enemy. The laptop screen cast a dim blue light in the makeshift command room in Mosul. My 15 years of marriage ended with an email. The air was thick with the smell of diesel and the hum of servers, but to me it was silence. And then a notification popped up, an email with no subject from Leah. I clicked. It wasn't a letter. The content was presented like a battlefield damage report, 3 lines, nothing more, nothing less. The bullet points were brief, efficient, and cruel. Item 1, divorce papers have been filed. Item 2, our joint accounts have been handled. Item 3, her new boyfriend Trevor has moved into our house in Fayetteville. A surge of anger should have erupted, but it didn't. Instead, a strange calm enveloped me. It was the calm that settles when a potential threat finally reveals itself. The rage didn't evaporate. It froze, compressing into a cold, focused core of energy. I read the email twice, not to feel, but to verify the information. I felt no anger, just an unusual stillness. Miller, my bunkmate, glanced at me from his cot. "You okay, Sergeant?" he asked without looking up from his book. "I'm fine," I replied, my voice even. "Just a little domestic issue." He nodded. That was the sign the conversation was over. Soldiers know when to leave each other alone. After that, I closed the ruggedized laptop. Its dry click was the only sound in the room. I stood up, walked to the communal showers, and let the cold water wash away the desert dust and the nascent heat of anger. I dressed in my uniform for duty, not speaking a word to anyone. When I returned to my bunk, I opened the computer again. I didn't reread her email. Instead, I logged into our bank accounts. Joint account, $17.34. Savings account, $0. Amount transferred, $62,000. Gone, numbers don't lie. They are cold, hard facts. The damage assessment was complete. I almost typed an immediate reply email, but my fingers froze above the keyboard. The laptop's screensaver came on. It was a picture of the two of us at Myrtle Beach, taken last year, Leah smiling radiantly, a smile I once thought could banish all darkness. I looked at that smile for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Then I moved the mouse, clicked the close button. The picture vanished. Now I opened the reply email. To Leah Hayes, subject understood. No arguments, no begging, no threats. That's how it ended. One war ended here in Mosul, another just began in Fayetteville, and I always finish the wars I start. The truth was, the email wasn't a surprise. It was a confirmation of what I had observed over the past 8 months, the data I had quietly collected. Things began to change slowly. Our conversations lost their warmth. "How was your day?" was replaced by constant complaints about the confined life of a soldier's wife. Then came the secrets. She started going to the gym, but came back with dry clothes and a faint scent of unfamiliar perfume. New items appeared in the closet. New friends I'd never met were mentioned in whispered phone calls, and her phone screen suddenly had a password. She began quoting her recently divorced friend, Melissa, who was living her best life, as if it were gospel. And then the name Trevor appeared. A financial advisor Leah introduced casually. But her voice glowed with admiration as she recounted his words. "Trevor says I have more potential than just staying in Fayetteville. He had promised a future unburdened by my deployments. A better future. Now I understood. Leah had completely succumbed to his sweet talk. I could picture her obediently following his instructions, forging my signature, draining $112,000 from our savings and accounts. I could see her smug satisfaction, believing she was conning over $100,000. And surely she had no idea that she was just a tool in a larger, terrible plan to defraud us of our very home, a $2.5 million plot of land she knew nothing about. The picture was clear now. It fit with the pieces I already had. I recalled a night in the garage when I accidentally overheard her phone conversation. The words that reached my ears were fragmented, but now they made sense. When he's gone. Paperwork and the perfect opportunity. Yes, my suspicion had been planted then, and now it had blossomed into an undeniable truth. I didn't confront her. I didn't warn the enemy they had been detected. I simply prepared. The intelligence pieces I had gathered weren't enough to fully expose their scheme, I knew that. But it was enough for me to start fortifying my defenses. In the weeks that followed before my deployment, I acted silently and methodically. First, I rented a small storage unit across town, paying 6 months cash in advance. One by one, I moved everything important there. Birth certificates, our marriage certificate, and most importantly, the original deed to the house, which was solely in my name thanks to the VA loan. My grandfather's watch and my mother's silver set went in there too. The truly valuable things, the irreplaceable ones. There was only one thing I couldn't move: the old oak tree in the backyard, the tree my father had planted the day I was born. That was my real legacy. Next, I went to a different bank, one Leah didn't know about, and opened a personal account. I arranged to have a portion of my salary transferred there, not enough for her to notice, but enough to ensure I wouldn't be starting from scratch if the worst-case scenario materialized. Everything was ready. The night before I deployed, she hugged me at the airport, a perfunctory hug. "Stay safe," she said, but her eyes were dry and her gaze distant. Like saying goodbye to a colleague, not a husband going to war. At that moment, I knew for sure. The email I just received wasn't the beginning. It was just the opening shot, signaling that the enemy had moved as predicted. I had prepared for this moment. And I always finish the wars I start. 4 months later, the C-130 transport plane landed on the runway at Pope Air Force Base. I didn't inform anyone of my return. Silence was a tactical advantage. Instead of going home, I rented an unremarkable grey pickup truck and found a cheap motel room tucked away on an old highway. The registration name was different. I left no trace. In the bleach-scented motel room, I pulled out a prepaid burner phone I'd prepared and dialed a single number. The other end picked up after 2 rings. "Cole here." "Ethan," I said, "I'm back." "Where are you?" His voice held a hint of concern. "Doesn't matter. Meet me at Rosie's Diner on Route 74. An hour." "Got it." He didn't ask further questions. Ethan was my friend, but more importantly, he was my lawyer. He understood confidentiality. Rosie's Diner was an old metal box, isolated in an empty lot where no one paid attention to anyone else. I chose a booth in a secluded corner, my back to the wall, able to observe all entrances and exits. Exactly an hour later, Ethan walked in. He scanned the room once and then walked directly to me, placing his leather briefcase on the seat. "You look like hell," he said, without embellishment. "Feel like it?" I replied, pushing a coffee cup towards him. "Give me the brief." Ethan wasted no time. He opened his leather briefcase and pushed a file across the table. "As you know," Ethan began, his voice steady, $62,000 from the savings account vanished. The transaction was made 2 days after you left. I nodded. That number matched what I had seen. He pushed another paper towards me. It was a refinance application for the house. Ethan pushed a paper across the table. "This is the problem." It was a refinance application for the house executed 3 months prior. The loan amount, $50,000, and at the bottom of the page, my signature, or a version of it. The penmanship was hesitant, and the middle initial was completely wrong. "Forgery?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. "No doubt about it," Ethan confirmed. "With the VA loan in your name, your signature was required. She and her lover drained that money last week." $112,000. Total damage updated. There's more, Ethan continued, flipping to another page in the file. I had someone look into this Trevor guy. He's no amateur. His record shows a pattern targeting military wives whose husbands are deployed, especially those who seem disgruntled. Manipulating them, draining their assets, then disappearing. Police in 2 other states are looking at him for similar cases. So Leah wasn't just having an affair. She had entangled herself with a professional predator. But all that, Ethan said, and he paused, his eyes giving me a knowing look, still isn't the main objective. Initially, I focused on the signature forgery, Ethan said. But something didn't feel right. Trevor isn't some petty con artist just for a few tens of thousands. His record shows all previous cases involve properties with hidden value. He paused, looking directly at me. That made me wonder, why would a professional predator target a regular military home in Fayetteville? The answer isn't the house. He flipped to the last page. It was a zoning map of Cumberland County and a few attached articles. That very question prompted me to dig deeper into the county's zoning records. And here's what I found. The land your house sits on, he said slowly, was quietly rezoned for a new commercial development 6 months ago. The house's value is negligible, but the value of the land with commercial development rights, conservatively estimated at about $2.5 million. The air in the diner seemed to thicken. The distant clatter of cutlery and laughter suddenly vanished. $2.5 million. Trevor, with his history of scams, surely knew this. He didn't just want the loose change in the accounts. He wanted the gold mine beneath the house. And to get it to build a shopping center, they'd have to level everything, including that tree. My father's legacy. This fight now had become much more personal. So, I said, my own voice sounding alien, $112,000 was just bait. Exactly, Ethan said. It was the cost of gaining control of the asset, a negligible investment compared to the return. He leaned back, his sharp lawyer's eyes fixed on me, waiting for a reaction. I said nothing. My hand, a soldier's hand, lay flat on the table, completely still. I slowly took a sip of my now cold coffee. Its bitterness was nothing compared to this. The image of my father's oak tree appeared in my mind, not as a peaceful memory, but as a strategic objective to be protected at all costs. So I said, my own voice sounding alien, $112,000 was just bait. Ethan gave a slight nod, a barely perceptible smile flitting across his lips. The last time I saw that look on your face was in Fallujah, right before you single-handedly took out that sniper's nest. He said quietly, they have no idea who they're dealing with. He didn't ask what I would do next. He didn't need to. The question now is, he said, returning to his professional tone, does Leah know she's sitting on a gold mine, or does she think the bait is the prize? I left the diner with Ethan, feeling like I'd just walked out of an intelligence briefing rather than a meeting with my lawyer. Everything had changed. This was no longer a messy divorce. This was a campaign. That night in the anonymous motel room, I opened my laptop. I didn't check email or news. I accessed an IP address only I knew. The screen displayed 4 small Windows images from the security camera system I had installed in my house a year earlier. A simple precaution. Living room, kitchen, hallway, front door. Everything was clear. In the kitchen, a stranger leaned against the counter I had tiled myself. He wore an old t-shirt holding my favorite coffee mug, the one my father had given me. He was Trevor, living in my house using my things as if he belonged there. I turned on the audio. Trevor's voice echoed self-satisfied. She doesn't know anything, absolutely nothing. Still thinks we're doing all this just for a few tens of thousands from the house. Another voice, deeper and seemingly more authoritative, replied. I couldn't see this person's face. Perhaps he was sitting at the dining table, out of the camera's view. Good. Keep things simple. Let her think she's the smart one. Don't worry, Preston, Trevor sneered. She's the perfect tool. A little sweet talk, a few promises, and she'll sign anything I put in front of her. Just make sure it's done. As soon as the land sale contract is signed and the money is transferred to the Cayman account, you can do whatever you want with her. Dispose of her, I don't care. But no mistakes before then. There won't be any mistakes, Trevor said, taking a sip of coffee from my mug. She'll be someone else's problem. I closed the laptop, no sound. So Ethan's question had been answered. Leah wasn't a partner in the $1 million scheme. She was just a pawn, a tool to be discarded once she outlived her usefulness. This information didn't change my objective, it only made it clearer. I picked up my phone and drafted a message to Ethan. Audio evidence obtained. They are in the house. Send me info on Preston Vance. Now. Dawn hadn't broken when I began my counteroffensive. No haste, just precision. First objective, the bank. At 9 a.m., I walked into the main branch asking to see the security manager. I didn't explain much to the receptionist, just showed her my military ID. 5 minutes later, I was sitting opposite a man named Thompson in a windowless office. I believe your bank processed a fraudulent transaction involving my assets, I said, placing the refinance application Ethan had given me on the table. I pushed my military ID and driver's license across the table. This is my real signature. Compare them. He picked up the documents, his face slowly shifting from skepticism to concern. He didn't need to be an expert to see the difference. I'll escalate this to our fraud department immediately, Sergeant Hayes. He said, his initial confidence gone. I know you will, I replied, and you should also know I'm recording this conversation. I left the bank. First objective accomplished. Second objective, the police. I went directly to the county police station and requested to file a report. I presented the facts, concisely signature forgery, financial fraud. The desk officer recorded my statement mechanically. To him, it was just another piece of paper. To me, it was a bullet loaded into the magazine. While I was there, Ethan was performing his task. A message arrived at 11:30 a.m. Court has accepted. Emergency motion approved. All transactions related to your home address temporarily frozen. The net was cast. A second message arrived shortly after. FBI is involved. Preston Vance's name and his connection to multi-state fraud cases have attracted their particular interest. They want to meet us. Good. The game had escalated. I sat in my anonymous truck looking at my phone screen. 4 objectives, 4 actions, all completed before lunchtime. The gears of justice had begun to turn, slowly but unstoppably, and they had no idea I was here. The FBI acted faster than I expected. They didn't target Trevor or Preston. They targeted the weakest link. 2 days later, Ethan called me. His voice held undisguised satisfaction. They found her, Caleb. Melissa Shaw. Her exact, Ethan confirmed. They didn't arrest her. They merely invited her to the office to chat as Leah's best friend. Apparently sitting in a grey room with 2 federal agents isn't quite what she imagined living her best life would be like. She panicked. I could imagine it. Melissa's borrowed confidence quickly evaporated when faced with reality. The prospect of being considered an accomplice in a federal fraud case was an effective antidote to all illusions. Her lawyer contacted me, Ethan continued, his voice calculating. I told him that in these circumstances, cooperation is always viewed favorably. I think he conveyed that message to his client very clearly. And she agreed, I asked, though I already knew the answer. She handed over her entire phone, a complete data dump. She wants a deal to save herself. An hour later, an encrypted file appeared in my inbox. I opened it. It was the complete chat history between Leah and Melissa for the past 6 months. Hundreds of messages. I read, methodically skipping the meaningless chatter and searching for intelligence. And then I found it. A conversation thread from 3 months ago. I could almost hear Leah's tone as she typed those lines, a mix of smugness and excitement. She boasted to Melissa about to fleece all the savings and loan money from the house, about me being left with nothing when he returns. She even ended with an exclamation. So satisfying, Melissa, as I expected, replied with weak admiration, "Oh my God, you're so brave, I wish I dared to do that." But the decisive message came from Leah. It wasn't just a boast, it was a confession. When Melissa asked how Leah replied casually, as if it were the most trivial thing in the world, "It's nothing, just forge his signature a bit. Trevor says he'll take care of the rest." These lines were undeniable proof. They confirmed Leah's role. She was not a naive victim being manipulated. She was an active and knowing accomplice in the $112,000 fraud scheme. She knew about the signature forgery. She participated in it. I saved the screenshots to an encrypted folder named Evidence Phase 1. The bait I had dangled for Melissa 8 months ago, Ethan's business card, the offer of help if anything serious happened, had finally been triggered. Not by me, but by her own fear. Leah had been brought down by the very best friend she trusted. My plan was on track, step by step. With the evidence from Melissa, the next step in my plan was to confront Leah. But before I could take that step, an unexpected variable appeared. An email arrived in my personal account, an account Leah knew nothing about. The subject was a single word, Trevor. The content was even briefer. I know you are Leah Hayes' husband. I know you are investigating Trevor Jennings. We need to talk. Central Park bench by the lake. Tomorrow noon. Alone. No name, no explanation. It was a risk. But in intelligence, sometimes unexpected sources are the most valuable. The next day at noon, I was there. I arrived half an hour early, choosing a position from which I could observe the entire area. Exactly at 12 p.m., a woman approached the agreed-upon bench. She looked tense, but her eyes were full of determination. "Are you Caleb Hayes?" she asked, her voice soft but clear. I nodded. "My name is Callie," she said, sitting on the bench, maintaining a safe distance. "I used to be in your wife's position. I'm Trevor's ex-girlfriend." I remained silent, letting her continue. "What your wife is going through," she said, her voice eerily calm. "She's not the first, and she won't be the last if we don't do something." She opened her purse and took out a USB drive. "Trevor didn't just defraud your wife. He's done this to 9 other women before. All military wives, all manipulated, all lost their homes, money, and honor." She placed the USB drive on the bench between us. "This contains everything I've collected over the past 2 years," she said. "Victim names, account numbers, shell companies he used to launder money, recordings. I was one of them, Caleb. He took everything from me. I've spent the last 2 years making sure he pays." She stood up. "When I knew he was targeting your wife, I watched desperately. But I was just an individual, I couldn't do anything. Until last week, when I accidentally checked the county's public records and saw a temporary freeze order on your property due to suspected fraud. That order was filed by your lawyer. Right then I knew this husband wasn't like the others. You're fighting. That's why I had to find you. Use this information not just for your wife, but for all of us." She turned and left without a single glance back. I sat there for a long time, then I picked up the USB drive. The battlefield had just expanded, and I had just received a new arsenal. With the new arsenal in hand, my plan changed. This was no longer a time for probing. This was a time for attack. I sent Ethan all the data from the USB drive. A few hours later, he called back, his voice full of astonishment. "Caleb, this changes everything." "I know," I replied. "Arrange a meeting with the FBI. And with Leah. It's time to show our cards." The location was an anonymous conference room in an office building the FBI used for discreet meetings. No windows, just a long table, a few chairs, and a two-way mirror that I knew was certainly being used. Ethan and I arrived first. Special Agent Harris, the case agent, walked in shortly after. Leah arrived last. She walked into the room with her usual confidence, but it quickly evaporated when she saw me and an FBI agent waiting. She glanced at me, her eyes mixed with anger and a hint of anxiety. "What is this, Caleb?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Agent Harris didn't let me answer. He placed a thin folder on the table and pushed it towards Leah. "Do you recognize these messages, Miss Hayes?" I saw Leah's face go pale as she looked at the printouts of her conversations with Melissa. Her confidence crumbled. Trevor forced me," she stammered. "Really?" Harris asked, his voice devoid of emotion. "He forced you to forge your husband's signature to withdraw $50,000 from the house. He forced you to brag to your friend about leaving your husband with nothing." Leah couldn't say a word. But that's not even the most interesting part, Harris continued. That money wasn't the real target, was it? Let's talk about $2.5 million, Leah, the value of the land Trevor was trying to steal from you. Leah looked up, her eyes wide, completely bewildered. $2.5 million? What are you talking about? It was my turn to speak. My voice was cold and steady. He didn't tell you, did he? About the real value of the land, about how he defrauded 9 other women before you using the same script. I placed Callie's USB drive on the table right next to the folder. You're not special, Leah. You're just the 10th, the next pawn in his game. That was the decisive blow. The truth didn't just come from being defrauded, it came from realizing she was just a number, a common victim in a long string of tragedies. The entire world Trevor had painted for her collapsed in an instant. She slumped onto the table, hands covering her face, muffled sobs shaking her. Silence lingered in the room. Finally, Harris spoke. You have 2 choices, Miss Hayes. One is to face charges as an accomplice in a federal fraud case. The other is to cooperate with us. Help us set a trap. And maybe, just maybe, you'll save yourself. Leah lifted her head. Tears had smudged her makeup. In her eyes, fear had been replaced by something else. A burning hatred. He asked me to sign a power of attorney, she said, her voice trembling but full of venom. He said it was just procedure, so we could be together. He lied to me. She looked directly at me, then at Harris. What do I do? The operational plan was drawn up right there in that windowless room with Leah as the main bait. Her role was simple, to be scared passive and transmit information. The first phase was to create a countdown. From my motel room, I took out a burner phone and drafted a message, each word carefully chosen to convey exhaustion and resignation. Leah, I won't argue anymore. My lawyer, Ethan, will come to the house on Friday at 2 p.m. to begin asset inventory procedures. Just let him in. Leah, under FBI supervision, forwarded that message to Trevor. As we predicted, he called her back immediately. Leah played the role of a panicked wife perfectly, and Trevor, true to his psychological profile, tried to reassure his prey. He didn't know that the clock had started ticking. I told Ethan over the phone, the fake deadline has been set. He can't let a lawyer inventory the assets when he's trying to sell it. He'll have to accelerate his plan. Now it was time to release the second piece of bait. An FBI agent, posing as a wealthy real estate investor named Mr. Peterson, had contacted Preston Vance earlier. Now he called again. The call was played on speakerphone in the FBI command room. Peterson's voice came through a bit impatient but authoritative. Preston, I have to travel abroad this weekend. If we don't finalize the deal by Friday, I'm afraid I'll have to find another opportunity. I need a definitive answer. A brief silence on the other end. We could imagine Vance weighing his options. On one side, my lawyer was coming. On the other, a cash buyer was about to slip away. Pressure from both sides. Friday, Vance finally replied, his voice firm. We'll have everything ready. Meet at the house Friday morning to sign the papers. The call ended. The tension in the command room eased. Ethan looked at me, nodding decisively. He took the bait. He'll have to meet Trevor to finalize the last details. They'll be in the same place at the same time. The countdown had begun, and the prey was walking directly into the designated area. Friday morning. The Fayetteville sky was ironically clear. From an unmarked truck parked at the end of the street, I observed my house through military binoculars. Ethan sat beside me, silent. At exactly 9 a.m., Leah's car left the house. She drove to work as usual, a perfect performance down to the last detail, leaving no room for suspicion. 15 minutes later, the first target appeared. A sleek black BMW pulled up in front of the house. Preston Vance stepped out impeccably dressed in an expensive suit, carrying a leather briefcase. He looked more like a banker than a con artist. Trevor opened the door. They shook hands, a handshake of confident accomplices, and walked inside together. They're in position, I murmured. I opened my laptop, accessing the security camera system. The living room feed was clear. A hidden microphone I had remotely activated was picking up every sound. Vance's voice rang out, full of self-satisfaction. The buyer is ready. The money will be transferred directly to the Cayman account as soon as the papers are signed. Excellent, Trevor replied, a sneer in his voice. That fool still thinks she's in control. She'll be someone else's problem soon enough. Ethan glanced at me. I gave a slight nod. He understood. I forwarded the live stream link to Agent Harris along with a short message. Underway, execute. The reply was almost instantaneous. Received, teams ready. For the next 30 minutes, we listened as they discussed the final details, how to split the $2.5 million. They had no idea that the FBI and police had quietly surrounded the entire area. And then the signal was given. Unmarked dark sedans appeared from every direction, moving swiftly and silently. Agents in black tactical gear stormed the house from both the front and back doors. Through my laptop screen, I saw Trevor and Vance's faces shift from smugness to confusion, then to utter panic, as muzzles were pointed directly at them. Minutes later, they were handcuffed and escorted out. Preston Vance's polished facade had vanished, replaced by the face of a loser, shocked and disbelieving. Just then, as planned, Leah's car returned. She parked across the street, got out with her phone in hand, pretending to wonder why there were so many strange cars. I raised my binoculars, focusing on her face. Her eyes widened. Confusion quickly turned to fear, then to terrifying realization as she saw Trevor, the man she had gambled everything on, shoved roughly into the back of an FBI vehicle by an agent. Game over. Checkmate. I wasn't present at the subsequent court proceedings. My presence was unnecessary. Ethan represented me and the evidence spoke for itself. With the audio recordings from my security system, the message history provided by Melissa, and the data dump from Callie's USB drive, the case was closed quickly. Trevor Jennings was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for fraud, theft, and racketeering. Preston Vance, the mastermind of the operation, received a 10-year sentence. A few days after the sentences were handed down, Ethan sent me an encrypted audio file, title Post-Mission Report, Leah Hayes Interrogation. That night in the quiet motel room, I put on my headphones. First came Leah's voice, confident and somewhat condescending. "I'm the victim here," she said. "Trevor manipulated me." Then came Special Agent Harris's voice, calm and emotionless, as he read aloud the messages between her and Melissa. Silence stretched. I could hear Leah's breathing become shallow. When confronted with undeniable evidence, when she realized that even pretending to be a victim no longer worked, her tone changed. Her confidence shattered, replaced by weakness and belated regret. She began to confess everything, not only what she had done, but also her own blindness, her desperate desire to believe Trevor's lies. And then I heard my name. I'm sorry, Caleb, she whispered, her voice trembling. I was wrong. I didn't know how much I was being used. I was so foolish. I'm sorry for betraying you, for everything. I took off my headphones, placing them gently on the table. No triumph, just an emptiness, like an echo in a room that had just been cleared out. I walked to the window, looking out at the deserted motel parking lot, under the yellow streetlights. The war was truly over, not just on paper, but here. The next morning I checked out. I didn't look back. Leah accepted the harsh settlement Ethan offered to avoid criminal prosecution. She had to repay the entire $112,000 that was stolen. She had to relinquish all rights to all assets, the house, the $1 million land, and my entire military pension. She also signed a full confession to signature forgery and participation in the conspiracy. The divorce was finalized quietly. No disputes, no conditions, just an end. A few weeks later, Ethan forwarded me a letter. It came from Leah's lawyer. Inside was a handwritten letter. Unlike the initial email, this letter was an apology. Leah wrote about her foolishness, about being swept away by false promises, and expressed deep regret for hurting me and destroying our marriage. She didn't justify her actions, only hoped I could find peace. I read the letter. The hurt was still there, but the anger had subsided. I felt a sense of release, seeing her finally confront the truth. I didn't reply, but I kept the letter, considering it a sign that the war had truly ended, not just legally, but within my soul. Several months later, when everything had settled down, I received a call from Special Agent Harris. "Sergeant Hayes," he said, his voice more formal than usual, "I'm calling to let you know your case became key." He explained that the evidence collected from my house, combined with the data from that USB drive, helped the FBI dismantle Trevor and Vance's entire fraud ring. They weren't just operating in North Carolina. They had targeted 9 other military families in 3 states. "Thanks to your actions," Harris concluded, "those families now have a chance to find justice. Some of them might even get their money back." I never returned to the house in Fayetteville. To me, it was just a crime scene, a cold memory. Ethan handled everything on my behalf. The house was sold quickly to cover legal expenses. But the land beneath it, the land with my father's oak tree, the $2.5 million legacy I kept. 6 months later, I submitted my early retirement papers. 15 years in the military was enough. I had fulfilled my duty both at home and abroad. The rage, that cold energy that had fueled me throughout the long campaign, had now dissipated. Only peace remained. With a portion of the land sale money, I bought a small log cabin deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains just outside Asheville. No neighbors for miles, only the sound of the wind whistling through the trees and the gentle babbling of the creek behind. I started woodworking, making simple pieces for the locals. Manual labor helped clear my mind. My military pension was enough to cover the rest. Life became simple. One afternoon, checking the mailbox at the end of the dirt road, I found a letter with no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Dear Sergeant Hayes, you don't know me, but my name is Sarah. My husband is serving in the Navy. We were one of the families you saved. Thank you for fighting when you could have simply given up." I read the letter twice. Then I took it inside and pinned it to the wooden board above my desk. Sometimes in the quiet of the mountains, old memories still return. But now I just need to look at that letter. It's a reminder that I protected my legacy and more. And here among these mountains, I am building something new. Something that cannot be stolen, forged, or betrayed. Something that is entirely my own.